Morning, my name is George. I'm a mentor on the GATS program for 2020. In this session, I'll be showing you how to go about interacting with the Qwiklabs, Qwiklabs practice sessions via your pluralsight link. Okay, so here we'll be doing creating a GKE cluster via the GCP Console. The first thing you do is to right click on this button and copy the link. Then you open a private browser, paste that link and hit enter. Okay, when this comes up, you will sign in with your pluralsight credentials because that's the only credentials that's recognized by that link. And be aware that you can't share that link with anyone. I haven't tested that anyway, but I would expect that. So you can't share it with a friend who is also a member of the program, but that link doesn't belong to them. So if you want to assist anyone, in getting the labs done, you will just direct them to the location of that particular lab in your tutorials and let them copy their own link and use that to join the Qwiklabs practice session. Okay, so this is the first screen that you will run into, and as you can see, it has the timer here, your scores are here, and then the instructions to carry out the labs are outlined as you scroll up. Okay, so it is advised that you read through the instructions in the lab. Read through the instructions in the lab first before you start. Now, these are the objectives of the lab, what you expected to learn at the end of the labs. And then these are the tasks. Okay, so most times we noticed most of you do not read this first one, that is lab setup. You usually jump and straight into actually doing task 1. Okay, so let's look at task 0. Okay, so here we are told several things. First of all, for each lab you get a new GCP project. That means the projects do not persist between sessions, and then a set of resources for a fixed time at no cost. So for the next 1 hour, as indicated here, I have access to these resources. Once the time goes outside of 1 hour, I lose access and I would need to start the lab afresh. Joshua. I think I knows. Okay, so the next one, the first of those lab instructions for task 1, we are told to use an incognito window. Most of us ignore this, and you end up using your normal browser, and then you have issues. Okay, so and then the next thing says when you are ready, you click on start, and then this window will this is where you get your information from, because when you start the lab, these will appear, and the password, the username, and the GCP project ID will be auto generated for you by Qwiklabs. So let's start the lab now. We'll click start lab. Then it's now ready. So the next thing we're supposed to do is we'll open a console. So we click on open console. Console opens, and then we click here to copy the username. Come back here, paste that, hit enter. Okay, then after that we'll take the password in the same manner, paste it here, hit enter. We'll be presented with this, and after that we move to this section. Now if you look carefully, we also noticed most people or some people, not most people, at least if you didn't read or if you didn't watch the intro video on how to use Qwiklabs, you most likely would click on this rather than this. So you can ignore this. This isn't your account. It's a temporary account that will be deleted at the end of the Qwiklabs session. So you click confirm. It moves you forward into the lab proper, into the console proper. Okay. Okay, there's this I know most times we are short on time and data, and would love to quickly run through the labs so that we can save data. Okay, that's understandable, but it's best you try out one lab completely so that when you're used to the initial setup startup processes for any labs, subsequent labs will be faster for you because you will know what to do, but you need to have a bit of experience. Okay, so here the console is live, and after that we're presented with the terms of service, and then we would agree. This should be ignored. You don't need any email updates. The email doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Qwiklab, and it is temporary. After this session, it will be deleted. Okay, so we have the Qwiklabs console ready for us. Dashboard, activity, recommendations, the menu, and each. If you look carefully, the menu is broken up into sections. You have the compute section. We have storage. We have operations, networking, tools, and the like. So you go through here when you want to access any particular service or tool to use for your personal projects or for this Qwiklabs. Okay, so there's a warning here. It says if you use other credentials while signing into Qwiklabs rather than using the one provided by Qwiklabs, you may incur charges. Be aware of that. If you do that, then your card or any other mode of payment used by you in that particular Gmail account will be charged for the services you've used up and the resources used up on GCP. Okay, so the first task is we deploy a GKE cluster. So we go back to the other page, the GCP console, and then navigation menu, and then we'll click on Kubernetes engines cluster. Okay, so we're here, Kubernetes here. Usually to give me easy access to this menu items, I would click on the pin here, which immediately takes it up to this spot so that I can always come here and access whatever menu I want without actually searching through the other menu. So let's go to the clusters area, and then say when we are there, we should create a cluster, and it says to begin creating cluster. You click on the cluster, and then what else are we supposed to do? Examine the console UI and the rest. So first thing first, we'll click on create cluster, and then of course a default name will be provided for us, and we're supposed to use that as is. We're not supposed to change that. So usually when you're told to use a particular name or use the name as presented to you by the console, it is best you follow the instructions given so that you don't get your labs, your scores not being recorded properly. Okay, so it said new cluster creation experience, keep the default settings or jump to the sections you want to update now. Okay, we can ignore this. And then we have cluster 1 as the name. We have a zonal cluster like we're told. This isn't as fail safe as regional. This makes it such that if there's a problem in a particular zone you picked, then the whole cluster goes down. But if you choose to have a regional cluster, then it is possible, not it is possible, it will make it such that you have redundant regions, and then if any particular zone within that region happens to go down for any reason, then you will have other regions to turn to. Okay, so well, let's click here and see what options will be presented to us. Okay, so region is this. You can specify default node locations. Okay, so it presents, if you click on this, it presents you with 4 locations found within this region. There are so many other regions. Europe West has just 3, but the default is the US Central region, which has 4 zones. So, but let's see what the instructions ask that we do. Okay, so from the image here, you see that it's just a cluster, the default name, the zone. So examine the console UI and controls to change the cluster name, the cluster location, and the Kubernetes version. Okay, to change the version of the Kubernetes engine that you'll be using or might be using, that will be done here. Okay, so there are different versions of it. This is the default. These are newer versions, I think. Yeah, they're newer versions, but this is the default, most probably because it's been tested most than the others and shown to be far more reliable. But you could try the newer ones if you're ready to shoulder any issues that comes from there. So the next is that clusters can be created across a region or in a single zone. A single zone is the default. When you deploy across a region, the nodes are deployed to 3 separate zones, and the total number of nodes deployed will be 3 times higher, and it costs more. So zonal is cheaper, regional clusters are more expensive. Now name the cluster standard -cluster1 and select the zone as US1. Leave all the values at their defaults and click create. Okay, so the name we're to create there is standard cluster1. So already cluster1 is there, so all we need to add there is the name standard with a hyphen, and then the zone, they said, let's look at the zone once more. Say US Central Zone 1A. So we select this and pick this. Okay, all right, so then we leave other values as they are and click on create. Okay, so while that is creating, we go over to read up, and they said next thing we do, the cluster begins provisioning. In a few minutes, provisioning is complete, and the Kubernetes engine cluster page looks like the screenshot below. So when your cluster is ready, you will see a blue check mark, a green check mark by the left of the name of the cluster, and that is an indication that the cluster is ready and has been properly provisioned. So our cluster is still spinning up. Another complaint we hear a lot from learners is that when they click here, this score does not indicate or does not record their progress. Okay, first of all, first thing, you need to wait for the cluster to provision completely. You need to see the green check mark here before you click this button. And then best practice, even when you see the green check mark by the side of next to the name of the cluster, I would ask you wait for a minute or 2 before clicking here, because at times what you see here might not be completely up to date with what is happening behind the scene. Okay, so while that is being set up and being provisioned, let us read further down. Okay, so after that we will need to click on the cluster name, so see the details of a cluster, the master version, the endpoints, that's the point at which you can access this particular cluster. It's an IP address, external IP address at that. Client certificates, the zone, the network, the subnet. These are things you can change after you created a cluster, and of course some other things can also be changed when you, after creating the cluster, you click on the edit button at the top. Okay, so the cluster is spinning. Let's see if it has actually been provisioned. Okay, it's still coming up, so we just need to wait a bit. Okay, so while we're waiting for that, if you look at the right hand side, that button there, when you bring out this set of information, these are options to help you learn more about deploying containers and or working with GKE. Of course, when you're using your own private accounts on GCP, you can come here and follow through with some tutorials to help you get better understanding of the GKE and how Kubernetes works. So, but don't try to do this in this lab session. If you do, you would have over allocated, or the console will error out because you are trying to access resources that are not assigned to this particular temporary Gmail account that has been given to you. So don't do this within the Qwiklabs. When you have your own time, do that with the GCP account you can create that offers you $300 free credits for a year. Okay, so let's refresh this again. Okay, so it's ready. Like I said, let's wait like a minute or two, then click on the button to check our progress. Okay, so we scroll back up. All right, so okay, so let's check that out. Click on this. It doesn't look like you've completed this step yet. Try again. Okay, so like I said before, you need to wait a bit before clicking that button. So let's wait a bit. Okay, so while we wait, let's scroll up or scroll down, scroll up anyway. Then okay, we'll click on it says the seventh step in that task 1 says we should click on the storage and nodes tabs under the cluster name at the top to view more of cluster details. Okay, we'll do that in a bit. So let's check and see if our progress will be recorded. It hasn't been. Okay, it's all right. So let's refresh it here a bit. Okay, okay, so let's refresh this page. At times the system doesn't work as expected. Okay, I think we waited up to 2 minutes. Let's try that again. Okay, it still doesn't work. Let's be sure. Standard cluster 1, Southeast America. Okay, so that's the problem. We actually created a cluster in the wrong area. So in this case, we can simply delete this cluster. I'll do that. Okay, so that's the mistake we made. We created a cluster in another zone, not the zone we were supposed to have created in. So we're having issues there. So it will take us probably 2 or 3 minutes to get it done. It's a simple lab. It won't take at most so much time to we'll get to it. So let's quickly create the cluster, this time in the correct zone. So if you click, after waiting like say 2-3 minutes, you click on this button and your progress isn't recorded here, my advice is check and be sure that the resources you provisioned is as you were instructed and expected to. So in our case here, we placed the cluster in a different zone within the region, the specified region. So for that, we're having issues. So let's delete that and pray that our quotas are not exceeded, and the lab would if that is the case, the lab will close, and then we'll have issues. Okay, so let's see if we can spin up a cluster and hope that that cluster name is no more available, and we can use that. If that happens, then we will need to close the lab and try it again. Okay, so it says region A, okay, and then hit startup. Okay, all right, so let's pray that we have not exceeded our resources. If we haven't, then this cluster should be okay. So this other cluster is still being deleted. Remember, clusters create virtual machines, and those virtual machines take a bit of time to be deleted completely. So this is still being deleted. So let's refresh the page. Okay, still being deleted while this one is still being created. So okay, while we wait for this to be provisioned, like I said earlier, if peradventure you mistakenly did what I just did here, creating this cluster in a different zone within the region we're supposed to have created, and after deleting it, and then you try to create another cluster, and Qwiklabs complains about resource overutilization, or complains about you trying to access resources that are not available to you. There's no problem. You always can stop the lab and try again, and this time you get it right. Okay, so the cluster is coming up. So luckily for us, the first cluster hasn't been a problem for our second attempt at creating a cluster. Okay, so while that is provisioning, let's look through where we will look at the details of the cluster. Then we're expected to click on the storage and the nodes tab under the cluster name to see more details about the cluster. Task 2 will involve modifying the GKE cluster itself. It says it is easy to modify many of the parameters of existing clusters using either the GCP Console or Cloud Shell. In this task, you will use the GCP Console to modify the size of the GKE cluster. In the GCP Console, click Edit at the top of the details page for standard cluster 1. Okay, so we are going to scale this cluster from the normal size of default size of 3 to 4. But before we get to that stage, let's check and see if our cluster is up and running. Okay, cluster is still being provisioned. Okay, we're still waiting. All right, so when we do that, we'll simply change the size of the nodes to 4, and then scroll down to save. Now click the arrow to the left of the clusters to return to GKE cluster page. So after that, we will deploy a sample workload. Okay, workloads are images of applications that we deploy to our created clusters. In this case, we'll be deploying an NGX image to the cluster. This can be done, of course, from your shell on your system, from your terminal. But in this case, we're doing it from the GCP console. Okay, let's check and see. Okay, the cluster is up and running, and hopefully when we click on check progress, it should indicate that we have successfully created and carried out a lab instruction. Okay, it doesn't. Okay, it does though. So that has been taken care of. So the next thing we're supposed to do, we'll click on the name of the cluster. Okay. All right, so we'll click on the name of cluster to see more details. Okay, issues reloading the page. That should be my network, but that's not a problem. Okay, we should go to clusters and not to. Okay, let's click that. Let's see. That should be my network and not GCP. All right, so that's that. So we can see the version of the cluster GKE engine we used, the endpoints, total number of nodes in that cluster. Remember, each node is a VM, a virtual machine, the network, the subnets, the port address range. This is the IP range for the pods that are in this particular cluster. So this cluster, if we wanted to know how many nodes, how many pods can be created within these clusters, we would simply do the simple math of saying, okay, so we have a subnet of 10.8.0.0/14. Okay, that's if that being the case, we will do 32 minus 14. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not supposed to do that. Actually, okay. You subtract 14 from 32. Okay. Okay, subtract 13 from, okay, so I'll pull up my calculator. Okay, I'm supposed to use the terminal to do that. I think I'm missing something here. 1 minute. I think I should be able to do this like this. Okay, so the value is 18. Okay, the value is 18. So value is 18. Let me try something. Okay, it doesn't. So we do we echo this out. Syntax, wrong syntax. Okay, let's leave it at that so that I don't do. Okay, so the value is 18. All right, so the total bits we should have should be 32 bits for that network addresses using the CI CIDR classless interdomain namespace for network addresses. Okay, so since we have 18, to get the total for the total for the number of pods we can have in that cluster would be 2 raised to power 18. That will tell us the total number of pods. So let's quickly go to the next one. I said we should click on storage and click on nodes. So let's look for the name storage and the node and click on those to find out more. Okay, so that's storage at the top. Okay, there are no okay, there's a standard storage class. Okay, so but there are no persistent volumes, and it is standard storage on GCP, which is the persistent disk standard. So then let's click on nodes, and then okay, we have 3 nodes, and these are VMs, virtual machines. If you go to your compute engine section, and let's open that in new tab so we don't lose focus. Okay, if you open that, you should be able to see these nodes here, also here. Okay, sorry, my network is a bit slow. All right, so just give it a minute. So Okay, so while that is coming up, let's go down. They said the next thing we're supposed to do is to modify GKE clusters. So we'll be doing that. We will go, you can click here, edit, and it will bring up the cluster in edit mode, and then you can make changes. And of course, there are changes you can make while the cluster is running. The others you can't make unless the cluster is no more running. Okay, so let's check out our screen. Okay, we don't need this tutorial here. Okay, we can close. Okay, so you can see this, we're on the virtual machine page of the GCP, and you can see these clusters are present just as we saw them when we clicked on the node. So those are actually clusters. So what are we supposed to change? Okay, we're supposed to change the size of the nodes, the number from 3 to 4. So let's look for the node. Well, can we change the node? Appears to be at the top. Okay, total size of the node is here. Okay, I don't see any options to change this node, but let's come. Okay, let's go back. Okay, let's go back. Okay, this, click on this. Okay, it's the same thing, it's in the same place. Let's click edit once more, and then total size is 3. Basic automatic, looking for an option to delete. Okay, cloud CPU. Add-ons, add labels. Interesting. Okay, let's look at instructions again. It said scroll down to the nodes pool section, click on default pool and click edit to change number of nodes. Okay, so there's actually nodes pool, and that's the one here. So we'll click on it, and then we'll click edit. Okay, node pools are actually a collection of nodes with the same configuration. I think that's a way GKE uses to manage clusters. To manage nodes within its clusters. Okay, so when we're done with modifying that, we will click on save. Leave everything as they are and click save. Okay, subsequently we are to go back to the cluster page and check to confirm that our clusters have indeed been updated. The nodes have been updated to 4 and not 3. Okay, so let's click on this. It's still coming up. So all right, it's still happening even if there's no indication it's happening here. If you look at this, you see the nodes are being updated. So we give that a minute to have it to actually update while we go back to check and see. So task 3 there, we deploy a sample workload. Okay, so in the GCP console, we'll navigate to Kubernetes workloads, click on deploy, and then provide the needed information for the workload we wish to deploy. Like I said before, workloads are containers, containerized applications. So in this case, we'll be deploying Nginx server. Of course, this server is present in Docker Hub registry and can be accessed. And again, can be accessed by just passing in the name, and Kubernetes GKE will simply pull in this image and deploy it to your cluster. Okay, so the cluster is not 4, so we have done that. Let's go to workloads to deploy our workload. Click on deploy. Click on deploy. All right, so already we have Nginx latest as the default in the new container. This is asking us if we want to deploy an existing container. Let's see what we've been asked to do. Said click continue to accept the default container image ngx latest, which deploys a pod with a single container running the latest version of the ngx server. Okay, so it said we should click continue. Okay, so we click continue, and then it moves us to the next stage. In the next stage, scroll to the bottom of the window, click deploy button, leaving the configuration details at the default. So here we have a name for our application, ngx-1. The namespace, of course, is the default namespace used by GKE, the Kubernetes, and every other thing. We a default label of app ngx1 is applied to this deployment, and then of course we are deploying it to this cluster. This makes it possible you can deploy to several other clusters you have created. Okay, so they said we should click on deploy, and that should take about a minute or thereabout to deploy. And then they said when the deployment completes, your screen will refresh to show the details of your new ngx deployment. Okay, so it is deploying. Waiting for pods to warm up. Okay. All right, so it's been deployed, and our ngx is been deployed to our cluster, running in a pod on our node. Okay, check my progress. So just give it about a minute, then we'll click on that to have the Qwiklabs check if we actually have carried out the task as expected. Okay, so we have three. These are the pods, and unable to read all metrics. The max replicas 1 of 5. Basically, this gives you information about your cluster and the deployment you just made. So you can check for details here. You can check these labels, and of course this label selector that actually selects that deployment you made. Okay, so let's check if we have been successful, and if Qwiklabs recognizes the fact. Okay, so Qwiklabs says we've done the task as we should. Now we view details about workloads in the GCP console. So we go to workloads. I'll click here. We're already in workloads, but let's click that again so that I go to the general page of that workload section of the workloads. Now in the GCP console, on the Kubernetes engine workloads page, click on ngx1. So ngx1 is, okay, let's refresh this. Obviously our page. Okay, so we click on ngx1, which is our workload, to see the details of that deployment. Okay, so that's the detail of the deployment. Okay, namespace is default, the labels, the logs, replicas, tree updated, tree ready, tree available, 0 unavailable, pod specification, revision 1, containers, ngx1. Okay, this displays the overview information for the workload, showing details like resource utilization charts, links to logs, and details of pods associated with these workload. Okay, in the GCP console, click the details tab for ngx1's workload. The details tab shows more details about the workload, including the pod specification, number and status of pod replicas, and details about the horizontal pod autoscaler. Okay, so we click on details here. Okay, and of course all that has been mentioned will be presented to us. So pod specification, containers Nginx. Of course, container is a Docker image of Nginx. We named it Nginx-1. Minimum replicas is 1, max is 5. So this is our auto scaler. It says when load increases, it can hit a max of 5, and then when load subsides, it goes back to a min of 1. So we must have a min of 1 pod running, and then we can have a max of 5 when the traffic increases. Okay, so we go down. It says click the revision history tab. This displays a list of the revisions that have been made to this workload. Okay, so let's click the revision tab. All right, so we have only made one, which is today. Okay, so just one. Click the events tab. Okay, this tab lists events associated with this workload. So let's click events tab. Okay, so scaled up replica for sets this, scaling replica sets the rest. So we remember we increased the cluster from, okay, let's look at that again. Say scaled up replica set this. Okay, so let's others access the deployment. Okay, no, we're not doing that. So click the events tab. This tab lists events associated with the workload. So the workload events can be seen from there. And then the YAML tab. This tab provides the complete YAML file that defines these components and full configuration of this sample workload. Okay, so that would be most interesting to see. Okay, this is a file, YAML file, of course, the configuration file that you can use to deploy similar workload and create a similar workload running from maybe your terminal. So if you look through, let's see what it says. It says the tab provides a complete YAML file that defines this component and full configuration of this sample workload. So if you look through specification replicas 3, selector labels this, match labels this, makes the deployment, this selector labels makes it possible to actually pick up on the Nginx pod. You know, picks up on the Nginx pod using that, and the containers image pool policy always, and the rest of them, status available, and the rest of them. Okay, all right, I would copy this and save it to, I'll copy this and save it to a file on my system. And all right, so because it's important that I know how these things work. All right, so that is that. Then still in the GCP consoles, the details tab for Nginx1 workload, click the overview tab, scroll down to the manage pods. Okay, overview tab. Okay, scroll down to the managed pods. Okay, managed pods, there they are. Scroll down to the manage pods section and click on the name of one of the pods to view the details page of that pod. Remember, a pod is a container, so let's click on it and see the details. Okay, says unable to find the requested resource. Why that is the case, I don't know. All right, so let's look at instructions again and be sure. It says scroll down to the manage pods section, and okay, click the overview tab, then scroll down to the manage pods section and click the name of one of the pods to view the details. Okay, let's go back. It's complaining error. Okay, let's go back to the workloads. Let's see, it says in the GCP details tab for Nginx workload. Okay, so let's click this again. And then click details. Okay, and scroll down to, okay, obviously I'm doing something wrong. I don't see overview. Okay, so managed pods. Okay, so obviously I was doing something wrong. I was actually clicking on the node. So it says the details tab for the click the overview tab, scroll down to the manage pods and click on it. So we'll click on the manage pod here, and this should give us what we expect. Okay, so this is a container. A pod is a container, so we see the information about the container. The containers we have running, that's it, it's running. That's the state of the container, the controllers controlling it, the volumes are located, condition, restart policy, phase, running, node, that's the VM on which it's running, and the cluster on which that node is running. Okay, so that is that. So note, the default deployment will start with 3 pods but will scale back to 1 after a few minutes, so you may need to refresh the overview page to make sure you have a valid pod to inspect. Okay, so the pods details page provides information on the pod configuration and resource utilization and node where the pod is running. In the pod details page, you can click the events and logs tabs to view event details and links to container logs in cloud operations. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back to the pods. Okay, so let's refresh this page. Okay, so manage pods is 1. So initially 3 will be created and then later we scale back to 1. Okay, so let's click on events like they asked us to. Okay, events created, container started, container successfully pulled image, pulling image successfully assigned. This to assigned default ngx. Okay. The logs, the YAML, YAML file for that pod. Okay, so that's the pod and everything about that pod and the host IP and the rest of them. Okay, all right, so we go back here, look at, okay, click on the YAML to view detailed YAML file for the pod configuration. Okay, like I did previously, I would copy this and paste it into my, so that I can study it further. All right, so that's for the pod, and that is, this other one was for the deployment. Okay, all right, so what next? Let's scroll up. Okay, so it says end your lab. So to end your lab, you can either click here if you want, click here if you want. It's okay, whichever one comes first. Okay, so in this case, I'll click here and it would ask, do you really want to close? Whatever you've not done or done will be lost, and you say yes. And it now asks, what do you think? Can you rate the labs? And you do that and it closes, and then that's the end of the lab for you. Okay, note that in as much as the lab has ended, you can always come back and you can always come back and read through. It's always there without starting the lab. And an advice I would have for us is to have us replicate the same thing that has been done here from your system. And of course, for you to do that, you need to For you to do that, you need to have installed the GCP SDK on your system. If you do that, then it'll be possible to do that from there. Okay, so why don't we quickly why don't we quickly redo what we have done here on the terminal to see how that works. Okay, so basically we created a cluster, then we increased the size of the cluster to 4, then we deployed the cluster. Okay, so this should be pretty easy. Sorry, then we deployed, created a deployment of an NGX server on the cluster. So this should be pretty easy to do. So while this window is open, let me bring up my terminal and let's play around and see what can happen. Okay, so first of all, we're asked to create a cluster. Okay, container, clusters, create, and the name of the cluster we're told was a standard cluster 1. You can call it any name you want, doesn't really matter. We'll leave out the machine type and let's give it a zone. Let's make it, let's put it in a zone US Central, just like we did. So it looks very similar. All right. Error. Okay, I think, sorry, my mistake. It should be clusters and not clusters. Okay, so that should go. All right. Okay, so our cluster is coming up. Okay, so we want to do the same thing we just did in this lab from our console. So initially, the default number of our nodes that will be created with 3. We will see that it's 3, then we will do what? We'll increase auto scale replicas, make them 4, just as they did. Okay, so while that is going on, let me quickly check the command for auto scaling. Clusters. Let's hit tab twice. Resize. Okay, hit it twice. Okay, there are no options for that. Resize. Which one do you want to resize? Okay, I don't really remember how to get that done, so let's type in help and see what happens. So it says here, to resize a cluster, you pass in the name that I know, then you must give the number of nodes you want, the size, num nodes, and async. Okay, so this here is optional. That it tells you you can either give this or you give this. Okay, so you can either give the node numbers or you can give the size of the cluster. So let's scroll down, scroll up and see what this means. So target number of nodes in the cluster. Okay, size deprecated. So if you were to use this one, that would be a deprecated way of resizing a cluster, but it would still work. Okay, so when you see options here where it says it gives you a pipe, it shows you this pipe character between 2 options. That means either you do this or you use this. And then when you see the normal brackets here, I think these are called square brackets and this is the normal brackets. This tells you that this part of the command is a must, it's required. You must either supply the number of nodes or the size of the nodes you want to resize the cluster to. Okay, so let's go back to the first tab. Okay, so our cluster has been created and it's running. All right, let's check. Let's see Gcloud. Okay, kubectl. Okay, before we do that, we need to set up the context. In other words, we need to tell our terminal that whatever commands we're running against that has to do with clusters has to be directed towards the cluster we just created. So in that case, we would do gcloud container clusters, get credentials for the name of the cluster was standard cluster 1. Okay, so it fetches the credentials for that, and from henceforth any command we run using our kubectl will be run against this particular cluster. So kubectl, okay, kubectl gets pods. Oh, okay, I don't think there are any pods in there, but let's try that. There are no pods. I have not done anything. Okay, give me a minute. Get pods. Okay, there are no pods, so we haven't done anything there. We haven't deployed yet. So what we'll be looking at is the nodes. Okay, let's see the number of nodes. There are 3, just like we had it when we did it from the console. So the minimum number of nodes that are deployed is 3 for cluster, and each is up and all are ready. So let's do the next needful thing. Okay, so we are going to increase the size of a cluster from 3 to 4. So let's do that. So we say, let me get rid of this, and we say G. Remember, we are scaling the cluster, so we will be using the Gcloud, not Gcluster. Gcluster container clusters, resize. What cluster are we trying to resize? The standard. If you double tab, I bet you will get this cluster name come up. Okay, so remember what we said here. Remember we said we have to supply either the num nodes or the size, and it is a requirement. So in this case, we use num node because that's the more recent. Let's see why it's a plural, single. Okay, it's plural. Okay, so give it a number. You can leave out the equality character sign there, but you can put it. So we'll take a 4, and then let's hit that. Let's see what happens. Okay, yes, we want to resize it to 4, and I could show you this while the size is being done. Let me quickly go. Oh, sorry, that's the same thing. Let me quickly go to my GCP console. It's open. I can just do. So let's do Kubernetes. Oh, sorry, Kubernetes. Okay. Okay, it searches Kubernetes clusters. Okay, let's check that one out. Because those commands were run against this my project. Okay, so that's standard cluster. It's already up. It's up to 4 already. So that's my own private GCP account, different from that of Qwiklabs. I'm only taking the instructions from Qwiklabs and then running it in my terminal on my system, and then coming up here to view the results. Okay, all right, so that's running. We could actually check the states. Okay, so let's pick up. Oh, sorry, sorry about that. Okay, all right, so it's deployed, and then if you do I think we ran that command earlier, so I don't need to do that again. I see, just simply need to hit. Okay, so let's get the number of nodes. Let's get the number of nodes. You see, it is 4 and up from 3. All right, so now what's the next thing we're supposed to do? We're supposed to deploy, create a deployment of an Nginx server using a Docker Nginx image. Okay, so this was the process they went through to do that, to carry out, to actually do that deployment. In our case, we're doing it from terminal, so let's clean up the terminal. Now we do the deployment. Okay, so kubectl, double tab if you've forgotten, like I have. Okay, so create, what can we create? Deployment. Okay, the name of the deployment was nginx1, and then the image was an nginx docker image. Well, I don't, okay, let me use the latest because that's what we used there. Okay, so let's see what happens if we got the command right, and it's been created just like that. Okay, so let's quickly go back to okay, let's go to the workloads and see. That was fast. Okay, so it's there already. Okay, so we click on that. All right, so we have that. Let's go down to manage pods, just like we did in a Qwiklabs session. Okay, and the same thing. All right, so we have that running. That was extremely fast, believe me. Okay, let's look at events. Okay, it created a container, started the container, successfully pulled the image into the container, pulling the image, and then successfully assigned that port to a node. Okay, the logs. Okay, we can view logs. If you click here, container logs, and the rest of them, the YAML file for that process. Okay, let's see. It should be similar to what we saw, and it is indeed similar to what we saw in the Qwiklabs session. Okay, so you see how short it was for us to carry out the same task from our terminal. Extremely, it didn't take us up to 10 minutes. We're able to do that, and our cluster is up and running, and we can now follow through. So my advice to everyone is whenever you run a Qwiklabs session, after the session is completed, you've gotten your full marks, please come back to your terminal and see if you can replicate what was done in the Qwiklabs from your terminal. That will give you training on the commands and the rest of them. Okay, so let's quickly look at the pods. You know, previously we ran get pods and we didn't get any results. That's because we hadn't deployed. Okay, there you go. So we have pods deployed to 3 nodes on our GKE cluster. Fair and now. Okay, so we should clean this up now. We can clean this up by simply doing container clusters delete. The name of the cluster is standard cluster 1. Okay, it will ask us, do we want to? You can actually remove the pods at the deployment and then do the cleanup, you know, but I just cleaned it up from the cluster level. It will automatically get rid of the deployments. I would expect it should. If it doesn't, then we'll need to put that one out. Okay. Okay, so give it a few minutes. The deployment should be removed completely. Okay, so I would just close this window. I would minimize this one. So our cluster is being deleted, and if I go back here, go to the clusters, if you check it out, you should see, all right, standard, it says here the cluster is being deleted. So that is as simple as it can get. You see how powerful the command line is. It didn't take us up to 10 minutes. We had a cluster run up and running. So when working with the GCP, it pays to know how to use your terminal. When you do, tasks can be automated, tasks can be carried out very quickly and efficiently. Okay, so it takes some time to clean this up, so let's give it a few minutes. Once that is done, we will check to see if indeed the cluster has been cleaned up and the pods and the deployment has been completely removed. Okay, so it says the resource has been deleted. Okay, this is actually the address to the resource. Okay, you would use this, say you're making API calls or thereabout using your REST APIs in your application. You would use this to make those calls, and anything related to anything in that call with this address will actually be run against this cluster. Okay, so let's check to see if our cluster still exists. So we say gcloud cluster, no, container first, container clusters, clusters lists. All right, no cluster. Okay, so let's do see if any pods, but I doubt we will not see any pods, definitely for sure, because there are no pods. Because there are no clusters available. Let's check this online. Let's check if there are any workloads. There's workloads. Or any workloads. So there are no workloads yet. So you need to have a cluster to be able to deploy a workload. Without that, you can't do that. So maybe you didn't want to delete the cluster, just the workload. You can do that. You know, you can do kubectl. Let me look at that command. You can do. You would have done kubectl double tab. That's my trick there. Double tab delete. Double tab. So delete, and I now give it the name of the workload which I want to delete, which would have been nginx. But I wasn't planning on keeping a cluster, so I just simply deleted the cluster, and that would delete the workload for me. But assuming you had wanted to keep the cluster and get rid of the workload, this is the command you would have used from a terminal, or you simply would have come here and selected the workload and then done a delete. Okay, all right, so basically that's about as easy as you can get working with Qwiklabs. Basically, we need to understand that Qwiklabs is different. Qwiklabs accessed from pluralsight is very different from the Qwiklabs you would access if you went directly to their site. The one from pluralsight is free, it's part of your program, but the one you access directly online from their page, you have to pay for that, because you have to buy credits to be able to work on that. And like we said, always use an incognito window when you're working with Qwiklabs. It makes it possible. It makes it possible for you to avoid issues with your own regular Gmail account. Okay, thank you for watching, and please just click the like button if you found this tutorial very useful.